Boston Marathon. On the 15th of April, 2013, at 2:49 p.m., amid the cheers and excitement of the Boston Marathon, one of America's oldest and most beloved sporting events, two powerful blasts echoed through Boylston Street, just seconds apart. In an instant, the celebration turned to chaos. Smoke clouded the air, people screamed, pieces of debris were scattered across the finish line. Moments earlier, runners were completing a race. Now, some lay motionless, while others fled in panic. Two homemade explosive devices, hidden inside pressure cookers and packed with sharp metal fragments, had been placed near the crowd. The timing was deliberate during the final stretch of the race, when thousands of spectators had gathered to cheer on the last wave of runners. 3 lives were lost immediately, and over 260 others were harmed, many suffering life-altering injuries. But what made the incident even more heartbreaking was the setting. A day meant to celebrate perseverance, unity, and the human spirit, suddenly marked by tragedy. The individuals behind the attack were Tamerlan and Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, 2 brothers of Chechen descent who had lived in the U.S. for years. According to FBI investigations, they had no direct links to international organizations. Instead, their motives stemmed from online radicalization, personal resentment toward U.S. foreign policy, and ideological identification with overseas conflicts. Using bomb-making instructions found online, they crafted the devices, brought them to the site, blended into the crowd, and walked away, leaving behind devastation. But in the midst of the panic, something else happened. Boston responded. Within minutes, volunteers, medical personnel, firefighters, police officers, and bystanders rushed in to help. People fashioned makeshift tourniquets from belts, carried others away using water carts, and pulled barricades apart to transport the wounded. Because the marathon already had medical tents set up along the route, emergency treatment and transport happened at remarkable speed. Not a single person who reached the hospital that day succumbed to their injuries. Boston's hospitals like Mass General and Brigham and Women's ran at full capacity but never became overwhelmed. Just 3 days later, the FBI released surveillance images of the 2 suspects. The entire city watched as the manhunt stretched nearly 100 hours. During their escape attempt, the brothers were involved in the loss of life of an MIT police officer, stole a vehicle, and engaged in a shootout with police in the suburb of Watertown. Tamerlan was fatally wounded, while Dzhokhar was captured alive, found hiding in a boat behind a residential home. In 2015, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev received a federal death sentence, a verdict that has since been appealed and remains the subject of legal debate. In the aftermath, the phrase "Boston Strong" became a nationwide symbol of resilience. It appeared on flags, T-shirts, murals, and live broadcasts, a collective vow that Boston would never be broken by violence. The city established One Fund Boston, which raised over $69 million to support survivors and families affected by the incident. Security policies at major public events across the U.S. were transformed. Tighter screening, restricted access zones, and bans on large bags became standard. Several documentaries and films were later created not to reopen wounds, but to preserve the lessons learned. Notable among them were Marathon, The Patriots' Day Bombing by HBO, and Patriots' Day starring Mark Wahlberg. Survivors like Patrick Downs and Jessica Kensky, who both lost limbs in the blast, went on to become voices of strength and recovery, sharing their journey through advocacy, education, and public speaking. The Boston Marathon attack was not just an act of violence. It was a stark reminder of the risks posed by lone actor extremism in the modern world. But it was also undeniable proof that in the darkest of moments, compassion, courage, and community can shine even brighter. Las Vegas. On the evening of the 1st of October, 2017, tens of thousands of people gathered on the Las Vegas Strip for the final night of the Route 91 Harvest Country Music Festival. The stage was lit, the crowd sang along, and the night felt nearly perfect. But just minutes later, the scene would become the site of the deadliest mass shooting incident in modern U.S. history. From the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel, Stephen Paddock, a 64-year-old man, opened the window of his hotel suite and looked down at the crowd below. In the days leading up to the event, he had discreetly brought over 20 firearms into his room, including several semi-automatic rifles outfitted with bump stocks devices that dramatically increased the firing rate. Nearly 1,000 rounds of ammunition had been stockpiled. At 9:59 p.m., a hotel security guard heard strange noises from the 32nd floor. As he investigated, he was critically wounded, marking the first moment that security was alerted to something unusual. But within moments, Paddock began firing, unleashing rounds into the unsuspecting crowd for nearly 10 minutes. At first, many attendees believed the sounds were part of the performance, perhaps fireworks or sound effects. But panic quickly spread. People ran in every direction, climbing over barriers, diving under vehicles, and hiding behind concession booths. The venue was enclosed with fencing and had limited emergency exits, making it even harder for people to escape the chaos. At 10:12 p.m., Las Vegas police received the first emergency calls. Rapid response units rushed to Mandalay Bay. Once they located the shooter's position, officers began clearing hallways from the 21st to the 32nd floor. Paddock had used a metal bracket to block the door, delaying police access. By the time they breached the room, he had taken his own life. His weapons and evidence were found on site, but his true motive remains unclear to this day. The attack resulted in 60 lives lost and over 850 individuals harmed. Many suffered life-altering injuries, including amputations and long-term trauma. Hospitals across Las Vegas, from University Medical Center to Sunrise Hospital, worked around the clock. An emergency blood donation campaign launched that very night, with hundreds of locals lining up to help. Paddock had no prior criminal record. He was known as a quiet man, with a history in real estate and gambling. His father, however, had once been a notorious bank robber on the FBI's most wanted list. In recent years, Paddock had grown increasingly isolated and exhibited signs of psychological distress, yet no one imagined he was capable of carrying out such a well-planned, large-scale assault. In the aftermath, a wave of nationwide responses followed. The U.S. government and multiple states implemented bans on bump stock devices, which Paddock had used to increase his rate of fire. The ban took effect in 2018, but continued to face legal challenges all the way into 2024. The incident also raised urgent questions about hotel security, failure to flag unusual behavior, and the vulnerability of large public gatherings to long-range threats, a scenario that few had previously considered in detail. Route 91 is no longer just the name of a music festival. It became a part of the nation's memory. Many survivors later came forward to share their experiences through media, documentaries, and advocacy. Some became voices in the gun safety movement. Others chose silence, focusing on healing physically and emotionally. To this day, the Las Vegas event remains one of the lasting reminders in preparedness, vigilance, and the limits of prevention when violence strikes swiftly, unexpectedly, and with overwhelming force. The 11th of September. On the morning of the 11th of September, 2001, America woke up like it was any other day. But just a few hours later, the entire world would be changed forever. At 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11, a Boeing 767, crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City. Flames erupted. Smoke billowed into the sky. And just 17 minutes later, another plane, United Airlines Flight 175, struck the South Tower. Two devastating impacts, less than 20 minutes apart, brought the world to a standstill. Across America, people watched in disbelief, unsure if they were witnessing a disaster film or real life. And it wasn't over. At 9:37 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon, the heart of U.S. military command. Fire rose from the core of Washington, D.C. Minutes later, yet another plane, United Flight 93, was hijacked. But this time, passengers had learned what was happening. They fought back, attempting to regain control of the cockpit. The plane went down in a field in Pennsylvania. No one survived, but their actions likely prevented an even greater tragedy, perhaps at the White House or Capitol building. In under 2 hours, the United States suffered 4 coordinated attacks, meticulously planned by the extremist group Al-Qaeda, led by Osama bin Laden. For years, they had expressed hostility toward American foreign policy and global influence. The 11th of September became what they called a message of blood to the world. Shortly after the impacts, both iconic towers of the World Trade Center collapsed. The South Tower fell first, just 56 minutes after being hit. The North Tower followed. Lower Manhattan was covered in smoke, ash, and confusion. Nearby buildings crumbled. The skyline of New York was changed forever. A total of 2,996 lives were lost, including 2,977 victims and 19 attackers. Over 25,000 people were physically harmed. Among them were office workers, firefighters, police officers, medics, drivers, seniors, children, people who never made it home. Rescue teams rushed to Ground Zero immediately. They searched non-stop through toxic debris in hopes of finding survivors. Many first responders later developed cancer, respiratory illness, and other health conditions tied to their exposure. By 2023, more than 340 New York firefighters had died from post-9/11's health issues, nearly matching the number who perished that day. But the aftermath of the 11th of September wasn't only about lives lost. The United States launched the global war on terror. Afghanistan became the first battlefield. Osama bin Laden was named the top priority. The Patriot Act was passed, and the Department of Homeland Security was created, expanding surveillance powers, intelligence coordination, and border security. America's economy shook. Stock markets plunged. Flights were grounded nationwide. Insurance losses topped $40 billion. And in the hearts of millions, an emotional wound was opened that never fully healed. Years later, at the very site where the Twin Towers once stood, a memorial was built. Water flows into 2 vast footprints, each etched with the names of the fallen. Every year, on the 11th of September, families read those names aloud for those who never got to say goodbye. The story of 9/11 is not just a historical tragedy. It's a reminder that our world is not immune to hatred, extremism, and loss. But from those ashes also rose courage, compassion, and a shared resolve to rebuild together. 15 disasters. And still, that barely scratches the surface of what history has endured. These stories weren't meant to shock. They were meant to be remembered. If there's a disaster you think the world should know more about, suggest it in the comments. And if this series made you think even for a moment, consider subscribing. There's more to tell.